we had an incumbent to lose by 11 votes.
Oh, wow.
So there were a couple of neighborhoods that were like, I did that. I was like, yeah, if that makes you feel good. Yep, you did it. 11. Yeah. So, and that was to the point where you couldn't do a recount.
Oh, man.
Wow.
So when every vote counts, every vote counts.
Yeah, these are the type of stories people need to hear because sometimes they don't realize how close it is.
Bruh, 11. Man, all right. I'm gonna run and grab some water right quick before we get all started.
Okay. Madeline, I did drop the link to the Facebook, our Facebook page. So if you do want to share that with anyone, we'll be going live on Facebook under our page.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hello.
Hey, Jonas, in case I don't see Winta based on what we talked about earlier. So if you don't mind maybe just making that announcement.
Repeat that, it got cut off a little bit.
I was saying, I know we talked earlier about Winta just making the announcement in Tigrinya for people. I don't see her, just so in case she doesn't make it, I'll go ahead and pass it to you if you don't mind just letting people know.
No problem.
I'll mute that.
Gives you a little notice that we're streaming on Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So I was about to just let you guys know once it goes up. Yeah, I think we're officially live now. All right, so it's 6 on the dot. We will go ahead and get started. So I'll start with my introduction. My name is Philmon Mengestab. I am an executive officer at the Eritrean-American Community Center, which is hosting this forum this evening. I do want to first off thank all the candidates for joining us and agreeing to do this and speaking with our community. For anybody who is watching and does not know anything about our community, Eritrea is a country in East Africa. This is a culture-based community in Stone Mountain, Georgia. In addition to being very focused on culture and the country of Eritrea, we also believe very strongly in civic engagement and being present in our local community. So this is the reason why we are hosting this forum, because we have 3 great candidates who are representing areas where our members live. And so I know our members do want to hear from our local representatives. So once again, thank all of you for joining. In addition to our candidates, we do have 2 co-hosts that represent the youth of our community, Betty Omakale and Samara Araya. So I'll go ahead and let you guys do your personal introductions, and then I'll pass it off to the candidates.
Betty's going first, so.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, that me. So hi, everybody. Good evening. Happy Sunday. I am Betty Makala, as Philmon said a moment ago. I am super excited to be here and just to talk to our candidates here today. My day job, I am a worldwide performance marketing manager for IBM, for our cybersecurity unit. But today, I am just really passionate and excited to get to know our local Georgia candidates. So Samara, go for it.
Thank you for that transition. My name is Samete Araya. When I am not doing webinars with political candidates, I am a full-time nurse at the Grady Memorial Hospital. So honestly, I'm really honored to be here. Grady's mission about serving the community is right in line with the civic engagement work that we're trying to do here. So I'm just trying to live out those values on every day.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for volunteering and assisting me with this. I myself have done a couple of these, but I know it's the first time for both of you. So you guys have been really diligent in working and preparing, and not just coming on speaking, but doing research and familiarizing yourself with issues and candidates. So I want to thank the both of you for that. So I'll go ahead and take this moment to allow the candidates to introduce themselves real quickly. If you want to just take a few minutes to talk about what seat you're running for, the area that it covers, what motivates you to run, and what you hope to accomplish if you are elected. So I'll go ahead and start with you, Rebecca, and we'll go on to Beverly after, and Madeline.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to come speak with folks today. A little bit about me. There are currently 6 children in my house. 4 of them are mine. So it is a little bit loud, and I apologize for background noise. But I am by training an epidemiologist and a veterinarian. So my PhD was actually in transmission dynamics of infectious disease, which I never ever thought would be super useful for a political run. But actually, really, this moment in time illustrates how useful it is to have scientists with scientific skill sets in the State House to be able to do things like help influence state policy. So I really got into running because of my children. I live in one of the most livable State House districts in the state, 106, which is centered in Snellville, but goes out to Loganville, up to Lawrenceville, and up to Grayson as well, and a little bit towards Lilburn. So some Lilburn mailing addresses, but not Lilburn municipality. And I actually moved to Georgia almost 7 years ago now. And the reason we moved to Georgia was because I was pregnant with my first child. And when I was getting my second ultrasound at 21 weeks and 6 days, we found out that he would be born with a major birth defect. At that point, my husband is foreign. He just got his green card this year. So when we made our decision to move to stay in the US and to raise our family here, it was partially because we were really worried about the ACA protections. So because ACA was just coming online then, we weren't sure that it was going to sustain. And if our son needed major surgery here in the US, if we were raising our family here, we weren't sure that we'd be able to get back on the US into the US healthcare system. So for us, the decision to move to Georgia was really influenced by what our healthcare policy was here in the US. As well, standing in Georgia, a lot of the decisions that the State House is making really affect the lives of everyday people, right? For my family, the decision on the 6-week abortion bill was something that we felt very personally, because we know what it feels like to stand in a position where you have to make decisions about a pregnancy. And we know that we did not want state influence on that decision. That was something that really was between a doctor and a family. And I wanted to make sure that that space that we had was one that would continue to be protected for other families. As far as what I hope to do at the State House, I think we really need to have an honest conversation about healthcare policy in Georgia. While the COVID epidemic made it really more visible to a lot more people how desperately we need to do better for Georgians, this problem is longstanding. And we have to talk about solutions that sustain, not only to address the current crisis, but also make healthcare affordable for Georgians. We need to talk about education here. We need to talk about criminal justice reform. Certainly this year we saw the Justice for All package coming through. I think we can see a lot of progress here because we cannot walk away from all the events that have happened this year and all the awareness that has been built in people who don't usually take the time to introspectively think about the impact of the system on other people. So we have a real opportunity to make progress here. And I'm hoping with the influence of new voices in the State House, we will be able to get some of that progress through. So I'm really running with the hope that the Georgia my children grow up in is a Georgia that gives them and other children in their age opportunities that we are fighting hard to protect now. So thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce myself.
Great, thank you so much. Beverly, please.
Thank you. And first, let me thank the Eritrean community for allowing me the opportunity for you to get to know me. And I've had the pleasure of visiting your center many times. So it is an honor for me to be here. And so just as background, my background from 17 years of doing IT, I worked at IBM. And I currently work as the Director of Community Engagement for Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority, the owners of Grady Health System. So just want to make sure I'm well versed in terms of our panelists and where we've traveled roads together. But for me, I've been in Clarkston. I'm running for the unexpired term for mayor for the city of Clarkston. And I have been a resident of Clarkston for 20 plus years. And for me, I am vested in working in our community. If you haven't heard, a lot of the words in terms of the jobs and roles that I've had have dealt with community. And so when I was executive director for the National Panhellenic Council, I was the national liaison for the White House, and I worked with the Obama administration to even help to get the ACA passed. And so with our 1.2 million members, that was one of the responsibilities that I had, was to push and make sure that the affordable health care was passed. And so I'm very happy in terms of doing that type of work in terms of community. But as a council member, I was a council member for the city of Clarkston. I'm very proud to say that I sponsored the Downtown Development Authority. I sponsored Election Day so that our employees had the opportunity to have part of the day off to actually participate in elections. I sponsored Pet Day, where we actually provided free vaccinations and care for our four-legged friends, our family members. I worked on things in terms of parental leave so that our employees had paid parental leave to be able to nurture and build and have that bond with their children. I also worked in terms of the Clean Air Act. We also did the $15 an hour wage. We were the first city in Georgia to do that. I also worked in terms of decriminalizing marijuana in our city so that we made sure in terms of, and I always say that, is that we looked at it from a compassion perspective because we reduced the fines from $625 to $75. And so that way we made sure that people were not being a part of the system. And so with that record, I am very happy to say that that's just kind of what I did from a council member in terms of ban the bots so that people have the opportunity to apply for jobs. And if they had a criminal record, that would not be held against them, to at least have the opportunity to actually interview for a position. So all of the things that I really try to do from a council perspective was to look at inequalities that face many of our residents in our communities. And so I've been a champion for that. Even as a community advocate, while I was not a council member, I started Save Clarkston's Neighborhoods, where we were having issues in terms of our community and making sure that our members had their voice. And we organized and we did a lot of media campaigns to make sure that the issues that they felt in terms of the council not listening to their needs in terms of large developments and making sure that they were able to be heard. I also helped in terms of 10,000 mass distribution to our residents to make sure in terms of COVID spread that we reduce the amount of COVID spread that we had in our community. So again, I've always tried to make sure in terms of equity and making sure that our community had opportunities. That has always been my focal point. So what do I want to accomplish? Well, I'm on the clock because it's only for a year term and then have to turn around and do it again. But I definitely want to work on things in terms of affordable housing, looking at how we can have transformational policing where we make it more community focused, more centric in terms of how we engage and look at some of the structural changes that we may need to do. Looking at our environment, making sure that we have the right types of laws to protect our environment, as well as in terms of the sustainability, and making sure that we take care of our businesses. Many of our businesses were impacted by COVID. And so we need to make sure that we do those things to protect our businesses so that they can thrive as we go through the continuous transition of COVID. And so that for me is a good start for being as mayor, because I have to work with the council. And so making sure in terms of relationships that I have the support of 4 of the 5 council members. So that's not doing too bad. So I'm very happy for that. And that is pretty much what I want to do for Clarkston.
Thank you so much, Beverly, for that. And Madeline, if you'd like to go ahead as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Madeline Jones. I'm running for State Senate District 45, which is located near the Mall of Georgia and all the surrounding cities. I am running because I want to see more compassion in politics. I want to see more progressive people of faith stepping up to serve as elected officials. I think it's really important as a Democrat that we remind people that our party is inclusive of people of all faith and no faith. And it's really important to me personally that we elect people who have a heart for people and who are really trying to figure out what it means to serve people from all walks of life, and who are really trying to figure out what it means to be collaborative in this work, in this space in the legislature. So I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. I moved here my freshman year of high school. I graduated from Norcross High School and from Georgia State University with my degrees in political science and education policy. After graduating from Norcross, and graduating from Georgia State, I went back to Norcross to teach high school social studies. And my third year of teaching, I was offered a fellowship with President Obama's campaign here. And before going into my fourth year of teaching, I was offered a staff job to finish his campaign in 2008 in North Carolina. So I went to North Carolina for a few months. We won that race and it was historic, as you know. And so I went from being a history teacher to making history, and then I couldn't go back to the class after that. And so we moved to DC. We didn't have jobs. We just wanted to be there. And so within a few weeks, my husband and I were both working, but still, we moved. And so we were gone for 8 years. I worked for DC Public Schools in the Office of Special Education. Then I worked for my church for a couple of years as my pastor's assistant. And then I went back to the same program in DC Public Schools, but on a different team before moving to Ohio with my husband's job. And we were there for about 1.5 years before moving back to Georgia here in 2017. And so I've always called Gwinnett home. I've been a property owner the whole time we were gone. And I'm just really glad to be back. And so I think, and I will say my most recent role, it was working for Habitat for Humanity and on the Global People team. And I was responsible for building our diversity, equity, and inclusion program. So I recently left to finish the campaign. So I left it, my last day there was July 31st. I wanted to finish this strong because I see how much value and how important it is to really fight for what we believe in and really fight for this seat. This district is huge. It literally goes from Auburn all the way to Suwannee. It's got 9 of the 16 cities in Gwinnett are in my district. And so my priority is really to make sure that we, like I said, we have compassion in politics. We have courage when we tell the story about American history, because a lot of the issues that we see today are a direct result of our history and a direct result of our American founding and all the different people groups and how were they influenced and impacted by government over time. And so I think we have to have courage to be that honest about the impact of our history on today. And then integrity. I think the people who we elect should be people who have a heart for people. Every single one of us who is sitting here today, we are successful because someone invested in us. Someone invested in our learning, someone invested in our development, our health, and our well-being. And I think that if you take up this role, your primary function should be to serve others. And so that's the integrity, that's the heart of public service to me. And so my priorities are, healthcare, housing, and education. And of course, I care about a lot of things, but on healthcare, that's a very basic need. And I think we should all be invested in our society's well-being, literally our healthcare. And so I want people to have access. I don't want people to have to make decisions between going to the doctor or paying a copay or going to buy groceries or buying medicine. Like, I don't think those are the kind of decisions we should be having people make in one of the richest countries in the world. On housing, we have homeless populations that are people sleeping on the street next to empty buildings. And as our senators and our representatives go in and out of the Capitol, it is concerning to me that more hasn't been done to try to marry the need and the resource with having people sleeping on the streets, literally next to empty buildings. So I would like to see some more partnerships and collaborations and try to figure out literally how to get people off the street and set them on a path for some sort of self-sufficiency and sustainability. And then last but not least, in education, we have to elevate teacher voice in decision-making. I know the feeling of, a lot of decisions happening around me as a teacher, but I'm expected to carry out the vision and not having any say in that. And so it's very sad to me, especially with this coronavirus situation, that our teachers, their voice has not been elevated. No one's asked them what they think. No one's asked them how we should go about this. And yet they are the ones responsible for carrying out the vision that all of us share for what education should be. So I would like to elevate teacher voice and help put some supports in place to increase college graduation rates. So those are my 3 priorities, but of course I care about a lot of different things. And I'm really grateful and appreciative of this opportunity to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank all of you so much for once again agreeing to do this. So we'll not take up too much time, just a couple quick things, and then we'll dive right into the questions. In addition to thank you, I do want to thank Awit Iyasu, who is a member of our community center and current mayor of Clarkston, for helping facilitate this for us. So thank you so much for that, Awit. And also Shegun, in addition to also reaching out to candidates and also facilitating that as well with the Nigerian-American PAC of Georgia. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start with questions. Actually, real quickly, last thing, if anyone in the chat has any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in. We'll try to address all questions at the end. Also, if you're watching on Facebook Live, we have someone moderating there as well. Winta, who is one of our representatives, if you don't mind quickly just letting the people know and integrating that way they can also ask their questions as well.
Yeah, sure. Come on. So yeah, just like كمبيون زبالة تكون سب حتى بتجرني أنت لو دهان بتجرني حتى تواتي حتى نحنا زرقم سبات علنا so حتى.
Okay, thank you, Winta. And so let's go ahead and start with Betiel, who will have the first couple of questions on education.
Awesome. Thanks, Philmon. So as Philmon mentioned, the first topic we really wanted to get into was education. In all of the brainstorm sessions in preparation for today's discussion, education just kept on braiding through. And so it's a top priority for everyone. I think everyone's feeling the shift of reality when it comes to education as things are getting redefined. And so really the first question for you 3 ladies here, and let's start with Beverly, we'll go to Madeline, and then Rebecca, I would love for you to round us out. But essentially the question is, what type of strategies or what are your perspectives on ways to improve not only connectivity for our students that are in this new world of education, but just access to adequate devices to really ensure that they get the education and finish out and have a great step towards success in that K through 12 space. So Beverly, if you could just share first, that'd be wonderful.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. And for us, one of the things, since Clarkston doesn't have responsibility for school systems, the good thing for us is that because of coronavirus, the students are able to have laptops, right, and other devices. But the true issue is access to Wi-Fi. That's where they're really running into issues. And particularly if you think of a home where you have multiple children, that is a drain in terms of Wi-Fi. So one of the things that I want in terms of the council is to look at how we can create a digital equity program within Clarkston. Now, the digital equity program would be something where we would look at public access to Wi-Fi, private access to Wi-Fi, where we're looking at opportunities to make it where it's affordable, in some instances free for them to be able to use, and look at digital literacy in terms of that education piece. And so through that, we'll be able to get federal grants and other types of grants where we can make sure in terms of additional equipment that people may need to have and whatever else in terms of actually improving that quality from a Wi-Fi perspective. So from a city perspective, that's kind of an area that I think would be beneficial to help with our students.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think many people can resonate with the pain that you're highlighting for sure. Awesome. Madeline, how about you?
Yeah, I think we have to, in the short term, when I worked for DC Public Schools, we were starting a brand new program that was in response to many lawsuits about how well and how compliant we were being as a district regarding special education. And so when we were starting that program, we didn't have Wi-Fi in the building, but we all had hotspots. And so it's like, I feel like there's some very practical solutions here. I think that there would be companies like T-Mobile, maybe, I'm just throwing it out there, but I'm sure there would be companies that understand this is a global issue. We need access to Wi-Fi in a portable way. And that way kids can take it wherever they need to take it. And it wasn't, it wasn't some major, it wasn't a hardwire or anything. And so I think if we can provide the Chromebooks, and I think the question is, did we provide the Chromebooks? I know the money was allocated for it, but did that happen? I think there are people who would say that hasn't actually happened. So to verify that the money was actually used to purchase and provide the Chromebooks, and then alongside that, provide a short-term contract, maybe till the end of the school year, with these hotspots, and just distribute them. You monitor the usage on the back end, and I feel like that is a simple and practical solution. But I also am okay with parents being given the option to send their children to school. I think that in the building, I don't think, I don't have a problem with the choice. I don't. But what I do think should have happened is that the teachers should have been given a choice. I think we should have done it in a more, a more strategic way, where our teachers were actually given a choice early in the summer, so that we could take inventory and say, at X school, 20 teachers said they'll come back for these grade levels. What can our capacity be? How can we rotate the kids through the building so everybody sees their teacher once a week? Like, I think there was opportunities to be creative that just were not seized upon or even desired. And so on the technology front, I think the hotspots is a good short-term solution. Of course, it doesn't address the long-term solution, like Ms. Burke said, of just needing to invest in that area. But on the short term, on the long term for this school year, I definitely think we should have just approached it a little bit differently, understanding that choice is great for parents, but our teachers are also parents and our teachers also, have health conditions. And I just don't feel like, at least in our district, we were being as accommodating or even respectful of their role every day in trying to carry out this vision.
Wow. Yeah. I appreciate your braiding of practicality and creativity and really making sure that it's inclusive in all the different ways. Wonderful. Rebecca, how about you?
Well, I am answering a question about education following a teacher. So my view is obviously going to be yes and on that. I think at the state level, we have the opportunity to ask questions. Okay, so we have a bunch of different models that just happened in Georgia, right? We had a bunch of different schools to choose digital learning or choose in-person learning, or half and half. Some of them were able to provide laptops and hotspots, some of them weren't. Our rural counties consistently have a problem with things like broadband. So if we're talking about student access and we're talking about digital learning in rural counties, we're talking about a slightly different set of problems than those coming where there is the opportunity for a family to have functional internet, where there's an economic boundary, but the actual infrastructure is there. Digital learning is not going away in Georgia, right? We had digital learning days before we had COVID. We just had a lot fewer of them. And it again put us in the same situation like healthcare, where we had a situation where we were having people who did not have sufficient access, but not everyone got how essential this problem was. But at this moment, you can't look away in Georgia and ignore the fact that broadband accessibility and the ability to have a computer in your home that your child can use, or your multiple children can use different computers, which is a fairly large expense for a family, is something that we really have to think about. What ways have schools addressed this? Where has it worked? Where has it not? We have the ability to analyze that data right now and know what models did work. So in Gwinnett, we did have the ability to get laptops and hotspots out to families. Did we get them to enough families? Are those students able to participate in as many days of digital learning as families that did not access the hotspots and computers because they already had them, right? We can ask these questions and aim to make state level policies that help schools address these specific needs. So I think at the State House, this is something I would like to see us do, is actually go back and look at the outcomes for different families and look at the outcomes in different systems and see what does work and how we can be providing for the different school systems that really do have dramatically different needs when they're doing digital learning, whether for this outbreak or in the future.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm going to take one of your words that you mentioned to kind of like pivot us to our next question of accessibility, and really just think through, while the first question was very much in touch, mostly focused through K through 12, although it's applying to all of our students. The next question definitely focuses more on higher education and accessibility to it. So I'd be curious to get everybody's perspective on what exactly you will do to ensure that there's equal access to higher education to our immigrant community. Many of us have all different forms of statuses here when it comes to your United States like citizenship. And how do we really ensure that any student, all of our children can have access to furthering their education if that's the path that they choose. So let's continue with the path that we had earlier. Beverly, I would love for you to start for us.
So with that, one of the things that I thought was critical is education about opportunities and connection to the right people. And so one of the things that I found very interesting is that I was at a World Refugee Day, and there was a student who was a Gates Scholar. And she sat down with 4 other students and walked them through the entire process for them to learn how to be a Gates Scholar. And so what would help is that since we've become so digital in terms of using Zoom and other communication vehicles like this, to utilize that opportunity to have our high school students to give them opportunities to know what scholarships and other opportunities are out there, from accessibility, to let them know. Because what we have to do is make sure that they understand you need to start this at 8th grade on. This is something that you need to plan out 8th grade on, to make sure that you are prepared for opportunities like the Hope Scholarship and other scholarships that are out there. So to me, it's making sure that what's available, we inform our community about that, and we connect them. And what I've also seen is that many of our successful immigrants have created programs to help youth to be able to further their education. So they've created programs where people who are interested in becoming physicians, and then they can turn around and mentor with them. And so that goes back to that connection piece. So where there are abilities to connect people with those types of programs so that they will have scholarships, and then have the access and resources to be trained so that they can further themselves in the career, is an opportunity for them.
Yeah, I love that. Make sure as you're taking a step up, you're turning around and reaching a hand back to pull someone with you. So absolutely wonderful. So Madeline, your perspective.
Yeah, this is one of you mentioned specifically students having different statuses. And this is something that I would want to learn more information about, because my understanding is they can have completely different experiences based on these different statuses, and as far as cost of school and potentially access. And so I would want to learn more about the higher ed administration of certain, programs and what that works like, because my professional background is in K-12. And so, in K-12 is all access. And so and nobody's paying. I mean, nobody's paying for public school. And so, or we're all paying, I should say, when I really think about it, we're all paying for public school. And so I would just need to learn more. But what I do think is if we have talent in Georgia, and I think I agree with Ms. Burks when we're talking about 8th grade, I really would like to see there be more cultivating who is this child in front of me, not so much trying to figure out what do they know about what subject. And I think if we have more people who are trying to figure out who is this child in front of me, what might they do for a living that could be beneficial to the Georgia labor force, and trying to collaboratively come up with ways between the Department of Labor and the state superintendent and other private organizations to how we can meet the labor needs here. If there is a way to create a path that would make it easier for immigrant students to participate in higher ed with the understanding that they may stay in Georgia and we can keep the talent, I think we should be trying to build some bridges in that way. Because for in education, there's lots of programs where if you commit to teaching, or you commit to being a related service provider for 5 years, then your loans are forgiven. But the idea is to keep the talent in the state instead of having people graduate K-12 and then they can't get, the tuition is higher, or they can't get access, so they go to another state, and then now that talent is gone. And so I would like to see some more collaboration and bridges built, but I also need some, I'm happy to learn more about the specifics based on status.
Yeah, no, 100%. Definitely having our pipeline go towards the investment of our own state here for sure. Awesome. Rebecca, let's round us out.
Sure. So I think both speakers before me have illustrated clear steps that can help people, right? A mentoring system, making sure we're putting incentives in place so that we have people who do go through our higher education have a desire to stay here. But I think we need to be fairly clear, and I have had mailers come out about me in past, so I know that this is public knowledge, that I support your immigration status not being tied to your ability to get higher education in Georgia. And we have a large percentage of children here who do come from families who may or may not have documentation. That says nothing about their intelligence, that says nothing about their education, that says nothing about whether they want to invest in Georgia. There are passionate children who want to go out and be doctors or be, whatever they want to be. Their immigration status is irrelevant to their value here in Georgia. And I would very much like to see the state recognizing that if you go through K through 12 education here, you are able to get the same in-state tuition that other students get, because that is an opportunity for Georgia to take the K through 12 investment that we've made as well and help those children be able to be what they want to be. I mean, we really, this is an issue that I just don't, I feel is really important that we vocalize at the state level to make sure that people know where we stand on this. So I do support. So Brenda Lopez had a bill last year. There was also a Republican bill. So this isn't a one-party issue. We see the value of all the students here, and we want to see them succeed in the future. And I'm happy to work towards that.
Amazing. I couldn't have said that better myself. So Sameta, I'm actually going to pass the mic to you so we can kind of pivot our conversation into actually another hot topic of healthcare.
I'm going to pretend like I'm grabbing an imaginary mic. Thank you for that. Yes, I believe the pandemic has shown us a lot of inequities that were already existing in our healthcare system. This first question is regarding hospital closures, particularly in rural areas. Beverly, I recognize Clarkson isn't exactly what you call a rural area. So you've been answering the questions last, I'll let you sit this one out. But regarding rural hospital closures, how can we support access to healthcare in our more rural communities as the pandemic has forced a lot of hospitals that were on the verge of closing to already close? And Rebecca, I'd like to hear from you first. I feel like this is something that's well within your wheelhouse.
Hopefully, well, Gwinnett is not exactly rural though, although we do have a few cows locally. But so I think we have a couple of things that we need to do, right? If we make sure that we are getting the federal dollars that should be invested into our healthcare system in Georgia back into our system, that's a huge help to us, right? So if we talk about full Medicaid expansion rather than the waiver that Kemp has just set up, we're talking about putting more money into the system. We are going to need to talk about the fact that some of these hospitals that have closed, there may not be an opportunity to get that specific identical infrastructure back in space in that space, right? So we have to be able to think about what opportunities can we offer in the state to make sure everyone is supported. We know right now we don't have enough incentives to get doctors and nurses to live in the rural communities that they are serving. If we can talk about state level plans like we have for teachers to encourage folks to move, we have that opportunity. Telehealth is a concept that we have been using extensively during COVID with some success, right? It's not perfect for everything. It is an opportunity to make sure that people can get an immediate consult when they need it. And I think we need to talk about, so I saw some of the maternal mortality review committee speakers this summer, or this spring, previous to COVID. And one of the things that we're talking about was hub and spoke models of care, so that we're making sure that there is locally someone to go to. And then if you need the secondary service, there's ability to get there. I think also when we talk about rural healthcare, one of the things we need to be very open about is the fact that getting to that healthcare is an expense. And we need to think about how making sure that if you live 50 miles from the doctor and you need to see that doctor and there is no opportunity for you to get there, that is a boundary to care that's substantial and could be critical for you. So we need to think about making sure that we have transportation that people can access and afford to be able to get to those appointments as well.
Absolutely. I think highlighting the multiple different barriers in healthcare access is a very important point. Madeline, I would pose the same question to you.
Yes, I agree with Rebecca on those points. And I would just add that one of the groups that I've met with the last year since I've been running is the Georgia, I believe it's the Advanced Practice Nursing Association. And they are nurses with high degrees, with graduate degrees, and some PhDs in nursing. And I learned that in Georgia, we restrict their licenses to where they cannot fully practice everything they've been trained to do. And many of them would be willing and eager to go step into the gap that has been created by the hospital closures in rural Georgia. But because of the restrictions that the legislature put on their license, they cannot practice without paying a doctor to sign off on everything they want to do. So not only two parts, does it cost money for them to practice what they can practice because they have to pay a doctor for supervision, it also, they are restricted in what they can practice. Whereas if they take it right across the state line in any direction, they have this full extent of nursing that is really, if you're sick, you just want medical care. Like there's there's this gap where they cannot practice. And so once I learned that, it made me, I feel like that is really, we gotta get to the bottom of that, because as an educator, it doesn't make sense to me that we put restrictions on what someone has learned and their ability to practice what they've learned. And especially if they can take that license and go to New York and do it, practice this full gamut of services, but here we put a restriction on it. And so I want to look into that, because we could deploy our advanced practice nurses, many of whom want to go and are willing to go to South Georgia and rural Georgia to be the healthcare provider in the absence of a doctor. So if we have the choice between people going nowhere or going somewhere, I would always choose for them to go somewhere with these, and get the quality level of care, knowing that the nurses will refer to a doctor or a specialist or a hospital as a part of their oath, that they will refer if needed. But to have people not getting any care at all, I think, and to know that we've legislatively put restrictions on the license, is no reason, it's just literally legislative, then I would be looking into reversing that and really allowing them to practice to the full extent of their license.
As a future advanced practice nurse, I can wholeheartedly stand by that statement. I think even tying back into the education point, a lot of pay barriers to education exist. Well, of course they exist for doctors and nurses. There's less for nurses, quite frankly, because it's a shorter degree and you get quicker turnaround into the healthcare profession, which allows more people from the local communities to get access into the healthcare field, and then they're more inclined to pay back their communities. Whereas the further deeper you get into it, you don't have that connection as much. So I appreciate that. The next question I have regarding healthcare is something that Rebecca hinted at earlier, the maternal mortality rate in the state of Georgia, which I think we all are well aware is unfortunately far too high. I want to start off with Ms. Beverly Burks, since I left you out of the first round. Just from a local level, what strategies do you see available to address Georgia's very high maternal mortality rate, particularly among women of color and people who are in women of other marginalized populations?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. You see for Black women that they are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related deaths. And so a couple of things that we really need to look at is there's growing research out there to acknowledge that there is actually structural racism which plays into these health disparities that we see happening with maternal outcomes. And so a couple of things that we need to think about what we can do is we need to look at changing the impact of healthcare providers by improving communication and eliminating those implicit biases. If you sit back and think about it, look what happened to Serena Williams. She was a millionaire and she had issues in terms of her ability to have her child. So if a millionaire has issues, what do you think a person, everyday woman, will have? And so it's making sure that we eliminate those implicit biases where people think that women of color can handle more pain than other people, right? That's something that we've seen repeatedly being said. So making sure that we do things in terms of reducing those biases. Look at how from a preconception that we reduce those health disparities that often tend to be issues for women as they're going through their pregnancy, that meaning diabetes, hypertension, obesity. All of those factors tend to make it harder in terms of the mortality rates for women as they're going through their pregnancy, but also look at postpartum, making sure that we partner with organizations so that they can get the care and access and the treatment that they need to make sure that they're living healthy going through that phase as well. But also making sure that we have educational programs for family members, because during that time, they need to be the advocate for the mother as she's going through the pregnancy. So making sure that they're educated, so as they're going through the delivery phase, that they can make sure if they see something wrong, that they advocate for that person, because at the time that they're having the birth, they're not thinking about doing a whole lot of advocacy for themselves. They need someone who has been trained to make sure that they are an advocate as they're going through any issues that they see in terms of the delivery of the child. So making sure that we do that, educate, have resources, making sure that parents are advocates for the mother or the family member who is having a child are critical. And we have a lot of organizations within Clarkston, but making sure that they have the resources to help make sure that women who are going through that experience have access to that type of information.
Absolutely. Yes. Rebecca, same question to you.
Sure. So I'll follow with the absolutely yes again. So we know we have a standing problem with implicit bias in healthcare. I want to take a step further and talk about structural changes as well that we can make, right? So your birth outcome doesn't just depend upon your birth experience. It depends on your healthcare access before, it depends upon your healthcare access afterwards. We just extended our Medicaid window from 2 months to 6 months, which is helpful, but not sufficient, right? When we start looking at sequelae of pregnancy, and I think we look at maternal mortality because it is stark and it is obvious and you can't look away from it. But maternal morbidity is an important problem that also affects quite a large population of women. And when we start looking at these questions, we need to look at outcomes for both of them, right? If you have a postpartum hemorrhage and you live, you have still had an extremely traumatic event that is going to affect your ability to bond with your child and to make sure that you start off motherhood in a position where you feel capable and you're not severely concerned about your own health, right? So we need to have this conversation about morbidity, which is harder to measure and to analyze. Yeah, come in 1 minute, baby girl. Is because the numbers are statistically insufficient to see a change in several years, however, right? But if we extend this to morbidity rather than mortality, we really have an ability to analyze whether changes we're affecting are making improvements for women's lives, right? So I think when we talk about things like extending postpartum care, making sure we're connecting women to services, when we have implicit bias training, we have this at hospitals, right? Actually go through, if we surveyed mothers and saw whether there was a correlation between the hospital's level of training and the outcome for mothers, we start being able to ask whether these systems are even effective, right? You can't necessarily change a lifetime of conditioning in one implicit bias training, but you can know if I put all of my staff through the same training and then I evaluate how much they've absorbed from it, whether or not we're making meaningful difference in women's experiences and health outcomes. So I think we can use a lot of data here to make sure that what we're advocating for is actually helping communities.
There's a lot of great answers here. I don't really have much else to say beyond that. Madeline, could you round us out on this?
Yeah, I mean, I take a deep breath because, 5 years ago, my little one will be 5 in November, and I almost died giving birth to him. And so, I had a severe postpartum hemorrhage, that exactly what Rebecca just described. 13 blood transfusions and within 30 minutes because I really almost died. And so, you know, the psychological aspect and the PTSD of, you know, my son's birthday being the day I almost died is like, it's very real. And I don't believe for a second if I was here in Georgia that I would be here today, because I had that experience in Virginia where my doctors were top notch, where my actual doctor, I believe, was an angel who saw me slipping away because she's seen many people die. And she snatched me up off the bed and shook me and said, "You better live." That is not in a book. That is not in anybody's training manual. But she knew when I started talking about the galaxy and I was saying I couldn't see, because she's seen people die and she's heard them say that, and she's seen it happen. She knew to go off script and shake me in that moment and say, "You better live." And I said, okay. And so, you know, the reality of not seeing my baby for 2 days because I was in ICU. I had to have emergency surgery to stop the bleeding. You know, I didn't see him. I had him on a Wednesday. I didn't see him until Friday. And it was just completely different than my first experience with my first one. And so it's one of those things where when you live it, it's something that's very close to my heart. And we have to figure out why in Georgia this rate is so high. We have to put some money into it. There's no excuse for it. Again, in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, our scores on this are so low, and there's no excuse for it. And then that quality of care, that thing, whatever that gut is that says go off script, you know, I don't think that can be taught. And so I think it goes back to making sure who you have in those roles really do have a heart for people and a heart for service. Because just like in education, and I would even say in politics, in medicine, you know, you want people in front of you who want to see you well, who want to see you thrive, who want to see you live. And all that happens, you know, a lot of that happens off script and happens in community and happens in associations and things like that. And so it's very close to my heart. I am, you know, like I said, y'all, it is a miracle that I am alive right now. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my doctor, who was my angel. And but I just want to see us do better. We have to do better here. That, you know, I don't know what the differences are in Georgia and in Virginia, but I know we got to figure it out. We got to figure it out.
I believe I speak for everybody when I say I appreciate you sharing such a vulnerable part of yourself with all of us, and also we're very grateful to have you here in many ways. Good luck transitioning from that film on.
Well, I would love to, you know, share my appreciation well, but Alam did put a comment in the chat that kind of summarizes it better than I ever could. So I'll just read it and then go on to my next question. She does say, hearing the panelists speak about maternal health is deeply touching. Thank you, Beverly, Rebecca, and Madeline, for your vulnerability and your passion. So thank you all for putting that better than I ever could. So I'll just transition right into, I know one thing that's on all your campaign pages from what I've seen, and it's a big topic amongst our community. So housing and transportation, starting with a question for all three of you, and I'll keep it simple. How can we ensure housing is affordable for minorities, immigrants, and young adults who may not even trying to own their own home, but just even trying to afford rent? So Madeline, if you'd like to go ahead, go first.
Yeah, so, you know, I work for Habitat for Humanity, and we provided no interest mortgages, as people have to help build their house, the sweat equity. You help build your house, and then we provide a mortgage with no interest. So, you know, you just pay for the life of the loan. I think if more organizations or businesses were willing to invest in community in that way, we can expand access to housing and home ownership. But the reality is, on the economic side, until our wages rise with the cost of living, there is this gap between the increasing cost of living and what people actually earn. And so I think, you know, we may talk further down the road about wages tonight, but at the end of the day, there have to be people and companies, and I would even say start with government, that's committed to closing that gap. And so I think, you know, I would want to see, you know, incentivize affordable housing. You know, maybe for every development, you know, there on a local level, on a municipal level, maybe for every development, there is a set of housing, 10%, 20%, whatever the amount would be that is income restricted. I think that it has to be that intentional. It's not going to happen by chance. And so I would like to see that happen. And then I like numbers and I like data. So I really would want to make sure that these banks and whoever's responsible for loans, that they have to report on an annual basis, you know, who applied, what they look like, the age, the income. Like, we want to make sure there's equity in these lending practices, and not let up on that. And that doesn't need to happen necessarily. You know, the federal level can support what is already required on the state level. And I would want to make sure that that's required on the state level, because we just want to make sure that people are having a fair chance at getting a loan, and a fair chance at moving into places that they can afford to move on paper.
Thank you for that. Beverly?
And I agree with that, as well as one of the good things in Clarkston, we do have a housing trust. And so with that housing trust, we can help in terms of some of the closing costs that may be associated with someone who wants to move from an apartment to a home, or who is currently renting a home and now wants to own the home. But also looking and making sure that people are educated about other opportunities out there, letting them know about the Georgia Dream program and other mortgage opportunities out there so that they can take advantage of it. And as we're doing development, making sure that we have policies in place that encourage developers to make sure that they have affordable housing for residents within the city. A lot of times what you've seen them do is opt out and use that money and just pay the money, versus actually making sure that the housing is affordable and having some level of affordability within those units.
Thank you for that. And Rebecca?
Sure. So again, I'm following two people who've said intelligent things here. So I will just add on. What you will notice is that between Madeline and Beverly speaking, there were 5 different creative solutions that happened there, right? That conversation included Habitat for Humanity, looking at our loan practices, different Georgia-specific loans. There are a lot of creative ways to address the affordable housing crisis, and we're going to have to use a lot of them. I think one thing we also need to point out, people don't realize what affordable housing price points are. So in Gwinnett County, the average, or the median income for a family is about $60,000. So if you are talking about an affordable home that people can purchase, you're talking about something with a price point around $150,000. That's not what we're building here. So it is extremely hard for people to get that first step into home ownership, because we simply don't have the properties that are in that range. So we need to not only talk about programs and analysis of lending practices, but we also need to talk about what affordable housing looks like, and that our consistent idea of a house on an acre in Gwinnett isn't going to hit the price point of affordable housing. So if we want our teachers to live in the communities they're investing in, if we want our policemen to live in our communities, if we want our nurses to live in our communities, we have to talk about housing solutions that are going to allow people to take that step into home ownership in an affordable fashion. And that is, again, going to be more creative solutions. So I'm really glad to see the options we have so far. And I think we need to continue putting more on the table. And a lot of those do come from municipal and county level programs, right? So we need to be asking people who are running for our municipal government, what are their policies about affordable housing? What are their plans to make sure that happens? We need to be asking people who are running at the county level as well, because when we create vision plans for the county for the next 20, 30, 40 years, they need to include an understanding of the fact that we do want people who have the median income in this county to be able to reside in this county. So I think this is an issue we'll see across the spectrum, but it's especially important when we're talking about zoning, and that we have buy-in from our local, municipal, and county governments as well.
Thank you, all 3 of you, for your answers on that. And so I do have a couple of questions on transportation. One specifically for Candace running in Gwinnett, and the other one for you, Beverly. So I'll go ahead and start with Rebecca and Madeline. This one is about just basically, do you support expansion of MARTA, or in general public transportation, into Gwinnett County? And Rebecca, if you'd like to carry on.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our Gwinnett has transit plan on the ballot right now, right? And what we had previously was put in an election that was off cycle in the spring, and we didn't have a very large or representative turnout. Since then, we have looked at that plan, we have reevaluated it, and it has actually changed enough. There are more more bus lines coming into my area of the county, and the progress has shortened, so that we expect to see more transit happening in this area of the county. And I know you said you're centered in Stone Mountain and Snellville as well. So if you actually go look and read that plan, you can see we have direct bus routes to hubs coming in. We have our BRT coming in 5 years instead of 10 years. So I am really hopeful that this plan is going to have a big impact for folks here in Gwinnett, where it not only lets us get around regionally through this microtransit system that's planned, which was actually piloted right here in Snellville and had rave reviews, but it also gives us access to Atlanta and access to Northern Gwinnett, where there are more job opportunities for people here, right? Because the better we can connect this part of Gwinnett to areas where there are more jobs, the more our people here are able to benefit from it, as well as to be able to get around locally where they need to go. So yes, I'm hopeful that we see progress in transit here.
Thank you. And Madeline, same question. Do you support it? What does that look like, expanding public transportation to Gwinnett County?
Yes, before I say what I will say, Rebecca and I, before the coronavirus, we were both commuting. Like, she's commuting down to CDC, I'm commuting over to Emory, and I'm commuting downtown. And that was crazy. I mean, it would take hours upon hours. I took the commuter bus for a while, and then it got cold. And then one day, on the bus, this lady was sneezing and coughing next to me. I was like, oh my gosh. So then I said, let me get in the car. But it's like, if I had some other options, I would have felt a little safer, and we could have did a little bit more, So I'm like, the reality of being in the car for 3 to 4 hours a day, that is real for people that live in Gwinnett. And so we got to fix that. That is time that could be spent with our families. That is time that could be spent investing in our own learning after work. There's just so much time, community, after work. And so I think we have to, yes, I'm in favor of expanding it. I'm okay. I think we do need a stop in Gwinnett on MARTA. Even if it's just one, we need something, because we're here. When I left 12 years ago, we've exploded even more since then, and we still don't have a stop in Gwinnett. So I do think we need a stop in Gwinnett. And then all the other creative options I think are fine. The lanes a certain way. I lived in DC for a while, so they have those lanes where the whole highway you can only be a HOV for the whole highway from this set time to this set time, from 5 to 9, I think, and then in the afternoon from 3 to 6. And so if you are gonna ride by yourself, you're gonna ride by yourself on the street, and the highway is for people who are gonna, do the HOV, thing, or have somebody, in the car. So I think there are ways to get creative. I would like to see a stop. I'm glad that it's on the ballot this year. I voted yes. I encourage people to vote yes. But I definitely think there needs to be at least a stop, and then a willingness to be creative about what we can do with the buses, what we can do with the travel lanes themselves, and then incentivizing people to use it, because I do think we have to be honest. After this coronavirus, I don't know what the will be for people to travel en masse. And I think that's a conversation that a lot of people don't want to have, but I really do think we got to kind of think about that, as well as workplaces not necessarily wanting people to be in the building. So I think, this is going to require a little bit of assessment, but I am absolutely in support of trying to do something differently and investing in it.
Thank you both for your answer on that. I won't get on my soapbox about driving in Georgia. I think everybody already knows, but driving from Loganville to Atlanta is just not fun. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm sure people can relate to that. So this one is for you, Beverly, and just a little context on this, because this one was actually submitted to me recently from one of our members. Walking and cycling is a preferable and sometimes necessary form of transportation for residents of Clarkston, especially for immigrants and new arrivals. And many citizens do not feel safe while getting around the city, while on foot or via bicycle. So I just want to know, what way can we address their concerns and make walkability and just Clarkston in general more safer for them to do so?
Thank you very much for the question. A couple of things in terms of education is one, in terms of bike safety. Things that we can do is reduce the speed limit in certain areas where we have high pedestrian, high cyclists, to reduce the rate to 25 miles per hour. We've seen in terms of studies where if we reduce the rate in terms of people making sure that they're not hit, that helps in terms of the speed of the car. So number one, reducing the rate, the speed limits in those areas. Number two is making sure that we increase the amount of sidewalks that we have so that people are able to walk on the sidewalk versus walking in the street. in a lot of areas where we don't have sidewalks, you'll see people walking at night, and that can be quite dangerous, especially if you're wearing dark clothing. It's hard to see you, and it's really dark. So making sure that we improve the amount of sidewalks, and we're doing a lot of the streetscapes projects. I was happy to kind of be a part of that in terms of doing the actual streetscapes project. So you're seeing a lot of new sidewalks being put in, and we also have a SPLOS where we're looking at making those other types of road improvements, but also encouraging. One of the great hidden treasures that we do have in Clarkston is that we do have the path, and the path runs from Stone Mountain to Decatur. And so what we've seen is that since we've had COVID and people have not been able to use MARTA as part of their transportation, a lot of them have actually started using the path as a means for them to travel back and forth from home to work. So making sure that we encourage people to use the path. One of the other good things is that I'm on a Atlanta Livable Committee, and we have the Atlanta Bike Coalition as one of our partners. And so having them to come out in terms of bicycle safety, providing that type of information and resources to our community would also be beneficial. And unfortunately, COVID will not let me be great. But I would love, once we get past this, and if I'm elected mayor, one of the things that I want us to do is actually have an event that starts from Stone Mountain all the way to Decatur, where we allow people to walk and travel down the path, but also learn about the different cities and learn more about the path and bicycle and pedestrian safety. So those are some of my ideas.
Thank you so much for that, Beverly, and addressing that issue, especially for one of our members, is a huge concern. So I'm gonna pass it off to Samara. I know he has one question on business and economy, but before I do so, just some timekeeping concern. I know, Rebecca, you do have to go in a few minutes, so we'll try to get one more question in. And if you want to go ahead and answer first, and then after that, I know we're running on time, so we might not get to all our questions. So we'll try to see if the audience has any questions after this one question. So Samara, if you want to go ahead and start.
Yeah, no problem. So federal minimum wage has been $7.25 for a while. Georgia's minimum wage is $5.15, and that hasn't moved in several years as well. Two-part question. Do you support a more livable wage of at least $15 an hour? And if so, how will you fight for a more livable wage? And Rebecca, for time constraints, we can go and start with you.
Sure. So I think when you phrase this as $15 an hour, you take away the impact of that choice on people. So if we look at the yearly salary, if you are making $7 an hour, your yearly salary for 40-hour job would be $14,000. If you were making 12, it would be 25. And if you're making 15, it would be slightly over 30. So if you think that a person can sustain themselves in Georgia sufficiently on the current minimum wage, they are falling into Medicaid gap right now, right? So they're not even able to access health insurance. So I don't think it's reasonable to keep the minimum wage where it is right now. I would love to see it move to 15, absolutely. If we are able to flip the state house, that's a conversation we can have to get through the state house, right? If we cannot flip the state house, we still need to have this conversation. I will not turn down an option to get people to have a minimum $25,000 a year for working a full-time job, if that is the best we can do, because I know that the family that now has people working for $14,000 will have a noticeable and immediate impact on their family's health and well-being and their ability to spend time with their children or with their parents or with their community if we take that step. I would love to see $15 an hour happen here. If we flip the state house, I think that would be a great priority for us to latch onto. I am willing to increase if we need to make that less and make sure that we are getting a step in the progress. I will take that, though, just to be very clear that I think the best is increasing as much as we can. And if we have to take something that will get more people in a better situation, I would still have that discussion.
Thank you for that. Speaking of flipping the state house, Madeline, same question to you.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add because I agree completely with that. I think we just need to move it in the right direction. The right direction is up. 15 would be great. 15 is still not ideal, but 15 would be way better than 515, which is, it's just not realistic. And I love how Rebecca put it in the terms of salary, $31,000 a year. We need to really see how far can that go in Georgia based on our cost of living across the state. In some places that might be okay. I don't know. In some places that are more rural, that might be okay. But does it afford you healthcare? The main thing that's attached to your employee, most people's employment, or at least half the state's employment, is their healthcare. So does a $15 an hour job, afford you healthcare? Because if not, then that just the cost of that alone can take you right back into poverty or keep you there. And so, yeah, I don't have anything to add. I would like to see it increase, and whatever we can get done, whatever we do as far as business owners, though, I do want it to be incremental, because I don't think what we don't want to do is make our small business owners go under overnight, creating some policy that they have to implement immediately, which is really a failure of failed policy and flawed policy over time. And then our business owners take the brunt of it by having to implement it overnight. And so we'd have to have some kind of, incremental implementation, but it definitely needs to increase.
Thank you. And Beverly,
Well, I can say as a council member in 2017, we actually voted to increase our salary for our employees to $15 an hour. So we were the first city in Georgia to do that. So for me, it is, how do we improve the quality of life for our community? And we started with our employees. And that is something that I will continue to advocate for our community in the whole, in terms of Clarkston as well as Georgia.
awesome. Felmon, did you want me to still use the first question, or should we just keep moving?
Yeah, let's keep moving. So I know, Rebecca, if you want to maybe, before you hop off, because I know you have to go, if you want to give a closing remark for your campaign, and then if you have a campaign link, if you want to share as well, and then we'll just continue on with the rest of the program till the end.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I guess a closing remark would be for me that because this job is about representing the people who are here, and because at this point how we are reaching out to you is by phone rather than coming knocking on your door, there are a lot of people who have not had the chance to see us face to face, but I still want to have that conversation with you. So I am happy to have people reach out to me. My email is rebecca@rebeccaforgeorgia.com, or you can find me on Facebook or on my website. I'm up all hours of the night. So if you write me at 2 a.m., I will probably write you back, at least for the next 16 days. And then I might delay it to normal human hours so you don't think I'm crazy. But my website is rebeccaforgeorgia.com, and I'm on Facebook at Rebecca for Georgia as well. Legislators make policy or make specifically based on the needs of people who come to them, right? So when you have needs that need to be addressed that aren't being addressed currently, by reaching out and letting me know, I can work better for you. So I would love to have more people reach out to me. You can also look over my platform on my website. And if you have any additional questions for me, feel free to reach out. I know we've gotten quite a lot of media because there have been quite a lot of attack ads on TV. And actually, I do believe we should all have health care. And I do believe we have the right to protections in our jobs. So they're not entirely wrong, although the imagery is a bit gloomy. But I'd be happy to expand on anything that you've seen in a more positive light. But thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to folks. And I hope I see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, again, for your time. And we just wish you the best of luck on your campaign. And I'll just leave it at that. I just want to thank you so much again. It was such a pleasure speaking to you.
Likewise. Oh, and as for the cities again, Snellville, Loganville, Lawrenceville, and Grayson, but only small parts of Lawrenceville, Loganville, and Grayson are in my district, but kind of the parts surrounding Snellville. But there's actually a map on the website that people can type in their address and see if I'm their representative. And if not, you can still write me and I can help you figure out who your representative is.
Thank you again. Just to end on, timekeeping note. So we have about 20 minutes left. I'll go ahead and pause our own questions. and just go over to see if you have any questions from attendees or audience. And I do see one hand raised. Elsa, I'll give you an opportunity. I know there was a comment about maybe asking a question to Tigrinya. So if you do want to ask in Tigrinya, Winta, if you, or maybe Jonas, but Winta, if you can maybe translate as well for our candidates. And then I'll see what else we have in the chat. So Elsa, if you'd like to go ahead, I'll allow you to talk. And you can unmute yourself.
I just wanted to ask, we have young mothers who immigrated to this country in the past few years or several years. And because they are young, they are young families, they have children, and the mothers are in a bind because they want to go to school and continue their education, but they needed babysitting or daycare type of assistance in order for them to be able to attend classes. So is there any solution for that? Because I had heard that something was being worked out for it, but then I didn't see anything happen. And there were some mothers that were eager for that program. And I don't know, do you know anything about this opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Whoever would like to approach you first, Beverly or Madeline.
I don't know about a specific program. I will say this, one of the challenges for more women running for office while they have children is the exact same thing, childcare. And, absent from, taking your kids with you everywhere, which is like, me and Rebecca joke about this all the time, because we, in the beginning, a year ago, when we started running, we were tag teaming, like there would be all of our kids, and she'd be in the door, I'd be watching the kids, then we'd switch, and I'd be in the door and she'd be watching the kids. And so I don't know about specific programs, but what we could do from a legislative perspective is offer grants and funding to organizations that do that, and grants and funding to organizations that support mothers further in their education. I don't know, I would have to look and see, what kinds of programs exist, but we can always, I personally take the posture that we can always incentivize the good things we want to see in community. And so from a legislative perspective, expressing that that's a need, expressing that's a desire of some people in the community, I would definitely be open to, partnering and trying to figure out what resources could go to organizations and nonprofits that already are in the business of supporting women further in their education.
And to that point, I'm not sure about a specific program, but I know that some of our daycare facilities are providing scholarships, so that in terms of the cost, that might be a way for some of the mothers to be able to have their kids to go to school via a scholarship, while they're also taking some classes. Now, we may need to check at like Georgia Piedmont Technical College to see if there's some opportunities there for women to get their GED. So that might be an option as well. So I do know that they do have a GED program at Georgia Piedmont Technical College. And then some of the daycare facilities around the Clarkston area do provide some type of scholarships for parents in need of support.
Thank you both for your answer on that. And so just a couple quick questions from the chat. The first one is, what is your take on the rise of COVID? Will you support another shutdown? And how do you plan to help small businesses? So I'll actually just zero on the last one, because that's one question that Smetter had as well. Just one way you can support small businesses, especially immigrant businesses that are struggling due to COVID. Some of them may have already shut down. So if you can just address specifically that part for us. And Beverly, if you'd like to go first.
So one of the things that I did in terms of COVID and our businesses coming back, I worked with the city so that we could do a webinar for our businesses to find out what can you do to reopen your businesses? So we had Georgia Piedmont Technical College's Economic Development Department. We had DeKalb County's Economic Development Department, and Decide DeKalb, who is the development authority, to provide information and resources for organizations or businesses in Clarkston to have opportunities to grow or change or modify their businesses. So a couple of things that are very critical is that we have to get the mindset of a lot of our businesses to change, because we need to make sure that we can balance the brick and mortar, but also understand the importance of technology. And so working with or institutions like Georgia Piedmont Technical College to provide those types of training is going to be critical, because even if you're a restaurant, you still need to implement some type of technology or have that, so that number one, you can reduce the cost of if you have to do to-go orders, for example, and not so dependent on DoorDash and other type of things where they take a lot of that money out. And so you're not making as much income for your business. So being creative in terms of looking at technology, how we can balance that out, looking at programs that and incentives that will help our businesses to thrive during COVID, taking advantage of opportunities and grants, and making sure that we leverage our partnerships with having two institutions so close to our city.
Thank you. Madeline?
And for me, I think, I want businesses to be able to stay open with restriction, social distancing, and operating at half capacity. I think that, there are some businesses that cannot be open because of the nature of their work. Like I know with movie theaters and things like that, they're struggling. There are certain industries that are struggling. We don't want industries to no longer exist. We don't want that. And so we have to be open to, masks, social distancing, and capacity as creative ways to try to keep people from earning nothing, but also be safe until we figure out how we're going to address this long term. The reality is we don't have a long-term solution right now. I am open to a lockdown for a set amount of time with a very clear objective. If it were shown, which I think a lot of studies have shown from other countries, that this will be something that can get us into a place where we can get this under control, with the exception of essential services. And so, who defines essential is always the question. That goes back to your lawmakers and who you elect, right? But at the end of the day, we do have to get this under control, because we don't want this to be a looming thing for years and years and years. And if that requires a week, of lockdown, or even if it requires an alternating lockdown, this may sound simple, but I know when there's like water level issues, then you have like some cities have certain days of the week, or when certain houses can use the water, the odds are on one day and the evens on another day. Like, we got to get creative here in how we can really harness this thing, bring it together so that we can get out of this current state that we're in. And so I am okay with that level of restriction if it's a means to an end. But I do think that in the meantime, keeping businesses open with restrictions, asking everybody to wear a mask, asking them to socially distance in their spaces, asking people to operate at half capacity so that we just don't go completely under, trying to save some old version of normal. It's like, I want people to be open to a new normal until we can get this under control, is what I would encourage. And I think I agree with Beverly in the sense of, one of the good things I think about home working, a lot of people working from home now, is that it has lightened traffic. It has kind of said, this is a different Atlanta for a lot of people who are not on the road anymore. And so I think from a legislative perspective, if there are companies that are downtown or are in high volume areas during the day, can we incentivize them longer to stay home? What can we do to keep people home who can work from home and incentivize the business to do that? And is that a commitment, even if for a set amount of time, to help with our traffic issues and to help with our transit, issues? So yes. So to answer your question, I don't want to see businesses go under. I want masks, I want social distancing, and I want operating at not, under full capacity until we can get this under control.
Thank you again, both for your answers. So one last audience question. I know Alam had a comment and a question. So just for the sake of time, I may not get through all of it, but specifically for you, Beverly, and I know you can see it there in the chat if you want to look at all of it. But basically, she just wants you to follow up. You mentioned earlier about approving the 15-hour minimum wage. Can you discuss this in greater detail and what the status of that is in Clarkston?
So the 15 hours minimum wage is for our city employees. It is not something that we've done for the entire city, but for anyone who is working at Clarkston, their minimum wage starting would be $15 an hour. And so, you know, you have, if you want to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk, and you got to start at home, right? So that's what we did from a city council perspective. So if you're an employee or someone who applies for a position, depending on that type of position, if it's an entry level where it is something that starts off as minimum wage, then you would receive the minimum of $15 an hour or more, depending on your skill set.
Thank you so much for clearing that up. And I know Alam is one of our, most involved members in our community. So, and she does work in Stone Mountain, but also Clarkston as well. So I know she would love to get in touch with you to talk more about that. So if you can reach out to each other on that. So I'll let Betty ask the last question on civic engagement, and then we'll go ahead and let you guys close out and end the program for tonight. So Betty, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Phil. So we've covered so many amazing topics over the last hour. I feel like I've digested so much. I feel empowered. I've gotten to know you lovely people on a really personal level. So really this question is very simple. Just to kind of put a bow on so much of what we covered today. Why should people vote? What are ways that we could increase that participation? If there's one reason why we should vote, what would that be? And so Madeline, I would love to start with you, and then Beverly, close us out.
You should vote because it's your civic responsibility as a citizen. And I only think the reason why people don't think they should, or that they even have an option, is because of social studies education. We have invested so much in STEM, and yet our most basic fundamental responsibility as a citizen is to vote. And so I am adamant about civics, and I am adamant about making it a more robust part of our social studies curriculum, because your social identity is as important as your personal identity. Your social identity is constructed, very often in the classroom, and then reinforced, or you may find more of your cultural identity or whatever outside in the home. And so I think, as a social studies teacher, it just has to be done differently. And I think we just have not, as an education system, invested enough on voting being a civic responsibility of living in a democracy or a democratic republic. I want to see our babies voting from kindergarten all the way on. The same way we have mock trial and science day and all these other days, we need to have election day every year in every classroom in the state of Georgia, from the time they're in kindergarten to the time they're in 12th grade, so that by the time the second semester of 12th grade comes and they can register to vote for real, they are well aware and have practiced voting every year that they've been in school. It's just a normal thing. And so that is why, because it's your civic responsibility. And I really look forward and hopefully can partner with the state superintendent to figure out how we can make that more robust in our curriculum across the state.
Amazing. I don't know if you saw me write that down. My social identity is just as important as my personal identity. Wow, amazing. Beverly, what do you think? What is one reason?
All politics is local. So what you have to do is make sure people understand voting impacts you on a local basis. And one of the things when I ran from a council perspective, I made people realize I'm the one, in terms of a council member, that picks the judge, right? And so if you've gotten tickets, if you've had issues in terms of those types of fines, I'm responsible for doing that. And when you hit people with, how does it impact me? I think that's the most important thing. When you tell people, when you don't vote, you don't care. And so you need to understand that by voting, you can make a change in your environment and make a change that impacts the whole community. So one of the things when I had a young child ask me, well, what do you do as a council member? What do council members do? And so I had to explain it to a 5-year-old to say, hey, mommies and daddies work. So they said, let's get a bunch of people to run the city to make sure things happen. So we're responsible for doing things like making sure you have parks and make sure the lights and things that were important to that child. But the point is that we make things and bring issues that are important to people. And when you see how important things are, and by not voting, how you are making things to your detriment by not participating in the process, that hits home. When you see juries, and because you're not even on the voter registration, you can't even participate in that process, right? And so making sure that people understand, if you see people who've been, as you like to say, found guilty for things that they may not have been needed to found guilty of, did they have a jury? Were you part of the jury pool? Did you understand that's what happens when you're even registered to vote? You know, understanding, again, coming back to how does that impact me? How does that hurt? How does that help or hurt me? And so that's always important in terms of how can you get people motivated? Because a lot of times if you say, well, it's, you know, people did this and people did that, and they were like, that didn't have anything to do with me. And that's the reality. And unfortunately, that's a true reality when you're talking to people. But when you make it where it's important and it hits them, then it's a difference. And so that's, I think, one of the things that in terms of motivation is making people see, how does not voting impact me? How does voting impact me?
Yeah. Voting is important. Voting impacts your day to day. Voting is cool. That's literally all of what I'm taking from this. So thank you both so much for those answers. Phil, I'll let you round us out.
Okay, so I did want to end the program myself talking about voting, but I think you both put it better than I ever could. So thank you, Betsy, for posing the question and for the both of you for answering. So what I'm going to do now, as Rebecca did earlier, I would like both of you to just give your closing remarks real quickly. I know we're coming up towards the end of the time, but probably just go a few minutes over, but I think we're pretty much done. So if you can give your closing remarks, and then I'll let Yasu, since he did help facilitate this, Mary Yasu, give a closing remark, and then we'll go ahead and end the program. So Beverly, if you'd like to go ahead and just give a closing remark and talk about your campaign, and then maybe share information about your campaign so people will find more information about you.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to the Eritrean community and allowing me to let you know more about me. And I am excited to run for mayor of Clarkston. I'm excited for the opportunity to bring community back to Clarkston in terms of being that voice for so many people who feel and still feeling voiceless, but also making sure that we do things in terms of improving and leading with excellence. I think that's extremely important, to make sure that we lead with excellence, that we work together as a community, that we help our businesses to grow and thrive, and that we do those things that will improve the quality of life for our residents. And so for me, I am just so excited for the opportunity to speak to you, to let you know that you can join me on this journey. So if you want to join me on the journey, I want you to go to Beverly H. Burks, BURKS, you see it back there, .org, and to make sure that you learn more about me, and how we can together build a stronger Clarkston. So again, I'm just excited to see this is 16 days, sweet 16 before Election Day, right? And to make sure that we encourage people to vote. You can vote all week until October 30th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday through Sunday and Saturday, vote. And don't wait until Election Day. And make sure that you take advantage of, as I like to say, this election season now that we have. And so again, I am just so excited. I want you to know that if you allow me to be mayor, to make sure that we work on things that are very important to our community, like affordable housing, looking at how we can work and improve our police department so that we do transformational policing, looking at how we can protect our environment, and making sure that we do things to also improve and help our businesses. And so making sure we do all of that in a year got the clock running if I'm allowed to run and win. So that's a lot to do, but I can do it, and I've done it before. So I hope that you entrust me, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your time. And I'll leave my information and my email in the chat box.
And I will just say thank you again for this opportunity. Like I said, I told y'all I'm running because I want to see more compassion in politics. I want to see the heart of service in public service. I don't believe it has to be mean and cold and ugly and nasty. I think, it is really important. These decisions are going to be made with or without us, meaning, people who you elect are in charge of budgets, money out of your tax, out of your paycheck, and the laws that we all have to follow. So I think it's really important to figure out and participate and have a say in who those people are. Forums like this allow you to see who those people are. We want to be accessible. You have to have people in these seats who care about people. And I think that's just the bottom line. And it is time all across the board for us to really shift our thinking about who is in politics, who is in this seat of public service. Like I said, there's all kind of things I care about. I care about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I recognize that, like I said before, we all are successful, and we're sitting here today because someone has invested in us. And I think it's really important that regardless of your agenda, that you elect people who have a heart for people, who are willing and want to invest in the lives of other people. And so I'm asking for your support. If you know anyone who lives in Gwinnett, please, by all means, send them my way. I hope to be on your ballot, MadelineJones.com. And more than anything, I just appreciate you for doing this, because it's my heart as a former social studies teacher that people will get involved in politics beyond voting. There's some we gotta get to voting, but then people like you who are already voters and engaged, that you would get involved beyond voting and help great people get through the process, to get to the ballot, and then get through the process to get to our respective bodies, our legislative bodies. So thank you so much for your time tonight. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll drop my information in the box.
Thank you both, and I'll let Awit give his remark for helping, and thank him for facilitating, and I'll go ahead and close this out. So go ahead, Mary Yassi.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And first of all, I want to thank my good friend, former council member Beverly Burks, for joining us tonight. And also, I want to thank Madeline and also Rebecca for joining us as well. You guys did a great, excellent work. Philmon, Semere, and Betiel. I really appreciate the way you guys handled it. Thank you so much again. I hope in the future we're going to have this kind of forums right at our community center, and we will definitely love to see all the candidates come and visit us after they win. Beverly have been to our community center several times, and I hope you will be back to see us again. And I am really looking forward to working with you again. I want to thank all our community members for joining us tonight and for listening. And I want to encourage our community, make sure we vote, make our voice heard, and we need to make the difference. This election is going to be decided by minority communities like ours. And don't look at our roles, don't minimize our roles. Please make sure we are serious about election and voting, and we need to continue doing this as a culture. We are proud of the democratic process here in America, and we need to take full advantage of it, and let's vote and let's make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Yasu. And so I will just close by echoing his sentiments as far as being very appreciative and thanking the both of you and Rebecca for joining us here tonight. This is the first time, I mentioned before the program started, this is the first time we've done something like this. I personally have done it with NAPAC, but as far as the community, it was a great experience to be able to just speak to local candidates, and even if you're not running, just to hear from your experience, an experience that's different than the one that a lot of the people who arrive in this country don't have, just because of what's going on back home. So to hear from those running in the democratic process in America is extremely empowering for our community. The one thing I'll say about our community is the population of Eritrea in our community is not large, but we're extremely dedicated and powerful. And that's been seen, if you know anything about the history of the country, it's something that's very apparent. So while we may not have a huge number, relative to like the Nigerian pack, they are, a role model for us, and we want to be just as influential in our local community. So you are helping us, along that path. So I just want to thank you so much for being here. We look forward to Election Day and hearing that you both won your race, and we're supporting you all the way. So thank you so much. Thank you, Betsy and Samara, for agreeing to do this and helping me with this. And I want to thank everyone who attended tonight and supported from the community center. So I'll go ahead and just end the program here. But once again, thank you so much. And you guys are feel free to say anything, as we'll just end it right here. But if you guys want to say anything else, I'll let the time ride out for open conversation if you want.
I'm gonna hop off, but I just want to say, please vote early. Please vote early. Please vote early. We want as many votes that are already, tucked away by the end of this month, so that, the last 4 days or whatever will be smooth.
Yes, and I share that same sentiment. Just so you know, I was looking on CNN, and they were saying the total turnout for the state of Georgia has increased to 152%. That the total early in-person turnout is 62% increase, and that the absentee ballots is 648% increase. So right now you're looking at we're doing it, and it's our communities that are doing it, and so we strongly encourage you to vote for me, right? Vote for me. And make sure that we are so excited. I know I'm excited. I just love doing this in terms of working with the community and being a part of the community and being invested in the community, because when you have people who care and who are invested and committed to the community, it makes a big difference. And you see that difference, and you see in terms of the type of work that can be done that can make a difference. So I just want to say again, thank you so much. Get out and vote. Don't belabor it. Don't wait. Lines are going down, and I've heard people going across the street getting something to eat and then voting in that same vein, just like that. So take advantage. Make sure you take your kids to go with you when you do vote, so that they can be a part of that process. Start them young. Make sure that they enjoy it. Make sure it's a treat after they vote. You take them somewhere nice, so that it always sticks in their head, because those are things that are important, right? Yeah. So I just, again, you guys did a great job. And whatever I can do, whatever we can do to, just kind of make sure in terms of our communities, please let me know. I'm still, regardless of the title, I'm still an advocate. So that does not change the work that I do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention that I would say earlier, you are both welcome, and Rebecca as well, if you do see this, to our community center, hopefully when we open up. Through the pandemic, we haven't been as open as often, but once we do and get back to the grand parties that we have and the dinners and everything, you are both welcome anytime. So I just want to echo that sentiment from our earlier.
I'll be there. Yeah. I'm from New Orleans. I'm always ready for a party.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing.
You just point me in the right direction.
And I've been there, so I'm ready for more. So So
thank you so
again,
much.
Thank you, and you take care.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
So yeah, Samara, Betty, thank you. Do you guys want to say anything to the, remaining attendees? If not, I'll just go ahead and end it, but yeah.
Yeah, so for anyone who is here that has not registered to vote for this cycle, I would still encourage you to get registered to vote, because 2022, the entire House of Representatives is up for re-election, And also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Governor Kemp is up for re-election in 2022. So there's a lot of big names on the ballot in the next election cycle.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vote, 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 vote. Like, that's pretty much all I've got. So thanks so much for the chance to be here.
I'm glad you guys are here to say that because they've heard me say vote nonstop from my own mouth so many times. So to hear from someone else, I hope it helps. But I think we have an engaged community. So thank you, everyone. And I think I'll just go ahead and ear, but thank you guys.
Thank you for the opportunity, man.
Of course. Good night.
Good evening, everyone.
Bye.